Hello, flirties. Welcome to this brand new episode of Flirtations. Question for you. Have you ever thought to yourself, am I enough? Or had your enoughness questioned in dating and life, in your relationships, maybe with family, in your education, in your career? Felt like you're not doing enough? Like you've always got to be doing something, proving yourself, proving your worth, right? You just have a hard time slowing down, being well. Is this conversation going to be for you with Israa Nasir, author of Toxic Productivity and creator of the digital mental health resource Well Guide on Instagram? Don't go anywhere. So much coming for you today about this question of enoughness. I know you're going to love this conversation, and thank you, flirties, for being here. Truly, honestly, thank you so much for tuning in, for listening, for streaming, wherever you are in the world. All of this is for you. I just really hope you enjoy the show, you enjoy these episodes and topics and guests, and thank you for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. If you haven't, 5 stars. And now let's get into the full conversation with Israa Nasir. Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're joined by Israa Nasir, a licensed therapist, speaker, mental health advocate, creator of the digital platform Well Guide, and author of the brilliant new book, Toxic Productivity, here today to share with us about what it means to feel enough in a world that constantly tells us otherwise. Inside the conversation, we're exploring how hustle culture and the need to always be doing something don't only impact our careers, but also how we love and date. We'll talk about the sometimes invisible pressure to check every box and make things work, and we'll look at how comparison, perfectionism, and rushing intimacy can keep us stuck in dating loops that leave us anxious and yet wanting more. Israa shares insights on how family and cultural expectations shape our relationships and how we can honor our roots while still choosing ourselves. We also get into vulnerability versus oversharing, why external validation isn't the enemy, and how curiosity, not criticism, is the key to dating with more clarity and self-compassion. So if you've ever felt like dating was just another performance, like you're behind in this unspoken race to be partnered, or like your enoughness is waiting to be confirmed by someone else, this episode is for you. Let's do this, flirties, and meet Israa.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, on the show today is Israa Nasir, a speaker, licensed therapist, creator of the digital mental health brand Well Guide on Instagram, and author of the book Toxic Productivity, here to have a conversation with us about the connection between hustle culture, the seemingly never-ending chase to be enough, and how this relates to dating and relationships. Hi, Israa, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm genuinely so excited for this conversation because people never think about toxic productivity and romance.
Yes.
So when you reached out, I was like, finally, someone is seeing the connection. Let's talk about
gosh.
that.
Big time connection. I mean, I've got the book, Toxic Productivity, and as I was reading through it, right, pulling some themes, some concepts that tie or that we're going to bring into the conversation today. I mean, what you talk about, perfectionism, external validation, this like the chase to always be chosen, to be picked, right? This feeling like we're never enough. If we are not dating, right, that somehow we're missing out. We're going to talk about FOMO. Like, how does this not tie into dating and relationships?
No, someone's seeing it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into all of these topics and more today. But here at the top, learning a little bit more about you. And one of the first questions I want to ask you is, I want to hear a little bit about your training and experience as a therapist and how that influenced your perspectives on mental health and what you share on Well Guide.
Yeah, so I've been a therapist for 10 years and I've worked in various different environments. You know, starting off at community mental health, working with the unhoused homeless population, moving up to hospital, psychiatry, and then private practice, and currently in digital health.
Okay.
So tech-based mental health solutions as a clinical strategy and operations director. So I've kind of like made my way through the career in the last 10 years. But whenever I'm practicing, I would say in the last 5-6 years, I'm predominantly working with individuals who are self-proclaimed high achieving individuals, people who are going through life transitions, who are, moving from one stage to the other and are trying to kind of, they're struggling in following the path, the life script that we all have, right? And I also work with individuals who have chosen non-traditional paths and are, having the residual emotional blowback from that. So people who are choosing not to have kids, people who are choosing not to be married, like all these things that society tells you have to do, people who are choosing otherwise also struggle. And the people who feel the pressure to achieve in that life script also struggle. And the struggle really is the struggle of belonging. So a lot of like my individual therapeutic work right now is around how can people feel a greater sense of belonging in their lives so that they're more intentional, more meaningful, and more purposeful. But that's when I practice. My predominant like work is now in helping build systems that will support that.
Okay. Because you do a lot of work speaking with different companies, corporations, like working with, I guess, sort of like the connection between like the management and the bosses and the employees, and how can we feel like we belong to the places where we work, right? Creating some of that community within our workplaces.
Yeah.
Let's stay here for a moment, because if I had to distill my mission as the Flirt Coach into one word, it would be connection. And I also feel like there is this, there's this angst, right? This desire, this want for something more. Even those of us that have been on that more traditional path, which I was on for a long time, now very much on a non-traditional path. But like what is, okay, cool. Like we've checked some of the boxes of life kind of thing, or maybe we're still working toward checking some of those boxes. But like some of this like angsty energy we have, where I feel like underneath all of that is this search for who we are, where we belong, our community, our people, where we feel accepted. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about this concept of belonging that you explore in your work.
Belonging is a core human drive. And a sense of belonging gives us emotional safety. It gives us psychic safety. It gives us psychological safety. So from the moment we are born and we have like the smallest sense of awareness, we need a sense of belonging. And so that's why little children, like infants, will often cry when left alone, right? Because they've never been alone before in utero. They're always with someone because they can hear, right? And so that drive is like so basic to our like biology. And it's often threatened by our social structural systems, right? And which is like so, it's so counterintuitive to happiness, but that's kind of the world we live in right now. And so, belonging can show up in so many different ways. And when we don't have a strong sense of belonging, we don't have a strong sense of self.
Okay.
But the opposite is also true. When we don't have a strong sense of ourself, we will struggle to feel belonging anywhere, even if we're with people who care for us, even if we're with people who potentially we could belong with. And so the journey to belonging, to kind of come back to it, because we are born in that state, to come back to it, it requires you to really build a lot of self-awareness. But the world we live in demands you live in autopilot. So a lot of my work is asking people, inviting them to come back. Let's think about this. Let's reflect. Let's connect with our intention. Why do we chase the things we chase? Why do you want to be married by 30? Where did you learn this? Right? Like especially for women, there's so much pressure, on age and timelines. And even for honestly anybody, timeline is a big thing that people feel pressured. They feel imprisoned by it. And it takes us away from belonging. So that's what I try to explore a lot in my work is intention, emotional regulation, reflection, awareness, and integrating.
Oh, I love that. We're definitely going to come back to belonging because I'm curious to hear some some more about those barriers that come up to like that feeling of belonging, which absolutely shows up in our dating lives and our relationships. And yeah, as we teased a moment ago in the introduction, like this chase for external validation, perfectionism, like I imagine some feelings of worthlessness, like shame, guilt we carry into the dating process. So how we can start to build some self-awareness, some intention around working through some of those thoughts and feelings we have. It's coming, flirties, but I have a couple more questions here. We got to talk about here at the top, toxic productivity. I want to hear a little bit more about that term, what that means. And I imagine like toxic productivity may come from this place of wanting to belong, right? Perhaps. But what do you think?
So yes, absolutely. So toxic productivity is a framework. It's like a frame of mind that we have. And we utilize it to feel a sense of belonging because in the toxic productivity mindset, achievement equals self-worth. And the more worthy you are, the better you belong. Yeah. And the framework is like toxic productivity is the pressure that we feel to constantly be doing, to be achieving, to be meeting milestones, even if it's harming our wellness. Okay. And, I think that's a really important distinction because a lot of people think that anybody who critiques productivity is anti-productivity. And that's really not what the message is here. Okay. The message is let's stay connected to achievement and outcomes, but not at the expense of our wellness. And let's diversify where we get a sense of self-worth and where we get belonging, because it cannot be externally tied.
Right.
Forever.
Right. Yes. I'm having so many thoughts. We're going to come back to that as well. But I had one more question that I wanted to learn just more about you, your story, and your experience, and that is the immigrant experience. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that part of your story, maybe where you were born, where you've lived and moved throughout your life and your career, and how that might have tied into this notion of toxic productivity.
Yeah. So I'm an immigrant like 2 times over myself. I'm also a third culture kid, which means I was born somewhere and I lived somewhere else and I moved somewhere else. So you kind of straddle different cultures. I was born in Pakistan. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. Then I moved to Toronto, Canada, and now I live in New York. And my parents are also immigrants. And, the intersection of productivity, culture, and immigrant experiences is very interesting because it adds like a different layer of nuance. You can certainly struggle with productivity even if you're not an immigrant, but productivity and achievement and outcome become survival tools for immigrants. So the connection between outcome and survival, like your literal survival, like in a new place, becomes so deeply intertwined that it becomes the family culture, right? So it becomes very black and white. And so it's something that kind of I grew up in. And it's not that your parents are bad or they're emotionally neglectful, like nothing like that. This is just how they learn to survive if you have immigrant parents. And so that's what gets passed down. That achievement is everything. You have to meet the same markers other people are meeting. Like you have to compare yourself to other people, because if you don't, then you don't survive, right? It's a survival skill. Right. And so these messages of social comparison, perfectionism, using, the inner critic to motivate yourself, and not really having room for disruptive emotions, right? All of that becomes tied into how you show up in your life when it comes to success and productivity. So that's kind of like the intersection there. And that's pretty much what my experience was as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And thanks for sharing that, because I think oftentimes we hear when we talk about our familiar relationships with our parents or caregivers, it's attachment theory, attachment styles. Yeah, that's part of it, but also so much more with what you observe with not just how maybe your parents interact with one another or your caregivers, also how they interact in their parenting styles, like how you were raised, and then how, what are they doing? Are they always working? Like what sort of lessons and mindsets are they instilling in you? Yeah, it's so interesting. I had that experience a little bit. I think a lot of queer people have that, where we use achievement and external validation as a way to derive feelings of worthiness, even sometimes to distract from, right, oh, look over there kind of thing. Don't notice that I'm gay. Or somehow we just want to like make our parents proud. So it's like, I get this concept of productivity. Like, it's not inherently bad or negative, but when it becomes, when you begin to sacrifice and abandon yourself in the process.
Yeah. And it also becomes like a compensation tool for marginalized identities, right? Because whether you're queer or, you're not a white person or you're a woman, like if there's like or you're an immigrant, there's like a intersection there where people have preconceived notions about your ability, your place, and to prove that you belong there's that word, right? To prove that you are, sometimes some people internalize it as like, I'm one of the good ones. Look at me. Like, I can do the same things that you can do in terms of achievement and salary and title. Like, I'm one of the good ones. Like, there's like a way to battle the stigma that is placed upon marginalized identities. And I don't think anyone is doing it to be a jerk, right? Like, I think it's just like you're trying to survive in a world that's not built for you. So you just latch on to the things that will help you move forward, might give you financial safety in a world that doesn't want to give you that because of who you are. And so it's just like, it becomes like a really powerful coping skill.
Totally. And that word survival coming up again as well. 2 themes so far, survival and belonging. So interesting. I never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, same. This is a very unique conversation. I have not really talked about this aspect of it much.
Yeah, I tend to get that sometimes. That's right. Which I love. I love because in part of doing my flirt search, I don't just have the book and checking out Well Guide on Instagram. I'm also listening to other interviews you've given on other podcasts. And I'm just like, okay, what are some of the questions that she's getting? Like, what can I ask that's similar but different, and just create a unique, fun, but very insightful and helpful conversation too. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. All right, let's get into some dating and relationships. Let's do that now, as we alluded to quite a few things that we're going to be getting into in this part of the conversation. And so I think up first, just hearing about some of the parallels you see between this toxic productivity mindset and how that shows up in dating.
The emotional foundation is really the same, right? So the ideas around milestone markers that convince me that I'm worthy. So dating culture has that immensely, like time, how long you've been single, how old you are, number of relationships. Like, there's all of these very concrete metrics of success. I say that in air quotes for the people who can't see me. So the moment we put in a metric of success somewhere, you now have a comparison yardstick. And that's really the place where toxic productivity thrives. It flourishes if there can be a comparison, because a comparison is going to tell you if you're good enough or not externally. So a lot of the intention and the energy gets spent on performance in dating. Like, look at me, like I'm out and about. Look at me, like I had 6 dates this week, and like, right? And so there's this like performative aspect that really ties into toxic productivity. But beneath that is the shame that we carry that leads to a lot of fear-based decision making in dating. Right? If I don't, I have to stay in this relationship. My last 2 relationships were a bust. I can't, like, it can't happen a third time, right? So there's that shame that keeps you stuck somewhere, whether it's in a relationship or outside of it. And then, there's like the feeling of like not having a strong sense of self that can show up as avoidant, as I'm too cool, as I'm not going to be the first person to call, a lot of ego-driven behavior, because inside there is somebody who is hurting, who doesn't feel like they're enough. And the other way that I see toxic productivity show up, especially nowadays, this is like a current new thing that I've noticed, is literally utilizing the mechanics of productivity towards dating. So I recently heard somebody talk about optimizing their dating, right? So, and the person was giving this advice in that if you want to be successful at dating, you need to treat it like a project that you would manage at work. So you create a spreadsheet, you put in numbers, a number of dates on average needed, like number of messages needed to be sent to get a conversion to a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was kind of like talking about this like elaborate plan that can honestly only end in feeling extremely overwhelmed because so much of dating is outside of your control. You cannot spreadsheet your way into somebody else's heart, right? And so I think like that's another thing that I'm seeing is people are utilizing like productivity techniques on dating. Like in the book, I very intentionally added a case vignette of a composite client character who was doing exactly this. When it came to dating, right? Because I see people do this. They're like, oh, I need to have 10 dates a week. And of those 10, like 6 are going to convert to a second, 4 are going to convert to, people utilize that term, like converting. And it takes away the conversation around value alignment. There's no room left to think about who you are dating, like who you're sitting with. A lot of times people don't even know who they want to date because it's like, well, you know, they're going to have this job and live here and look like this. And it kind of, the list just ends there. And it's like, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like?
Yeah, that's really important in this pursuit to be chosen, to kind of quote unquote have it all, to have the relationship. Sometimes we're so focused on the goal, sort of the end product, if that's the relationship, that we forget, what do we actually want? Who's in front of us? Why are we dating? Do we even want to be dating? Do we want to be focusing maybe on other relationships? Are we taking attention and time away from our other relationships and putting all our eggs in one basket sort of mindset? And I've interviewed some of those coaches you're talking about. I have. I just don't do that. It's date tracking is the term I sometimes hear used, where it's you get out the spreadsheet, the Excel, the Google sheet. And it's a way to, you know, if you're dating a lot of people at one time, you're multi-dating, you're really, you know, going on multiple dates a week, you're having conversations on the apps, you're maybe meeting people in person too, to streamline your thoughts. And it's a way to, how it's presented to me is but I see a problem with this, take a little bit of the emotion out of dating. Right? So you go on a date and it's not so much, you know, did I have a great time or was the conversation good? It's okay. Did this person show up on time? Like, did they, if they're planning the date, did they engage or communicate with me, like to set up the date, or did they just sort of leave it hanging kind of thing? So it's a way for you to look at dating a little bit more objectively. Yeah, you can put an emotion column in there too. How was the vibe? How was the conversation? But I think it does take some of the feeling out of it when people are, you know, cells on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And you know what? I see the benefit of doing this. I would say that is probably not the only way we should be approaching it. I think that's what happens, right? People kind of fall into these like black and white mindsets.
All the time.
And I will also say that when you sit down to objectively observe like a series of dates and all you have are these like discrete data points that are like drop downs or check boxes or whatever, it can, like, context gets lost. And what you've done is you've kind of like reduced this 3-dimensional person into a 2-dimensional scoring sheet. And that becomes really unfair because you're not contextualizing the person or your feelings or your connection, the third entity, which is the connection. And it can lead to relationships that look good on paper, but don't actually have the emotional intimacy piece, right? And we see this all the time. Oh, I married them because everything fit on paper. The checklist, the spreadsheet is just another checklist. So I would ask people to like holistically look at people instead of this discrete scoring sheet, because it just reduces people a little bit.
I totally agree with you. I've never done really, the date tracking or the spreadsheets or anything like that. But if maybe you're a financial person, you're a math person, you you love Excel, maybe.
Add a column for context then.
Right. All right. I want to ask you now something you mentioned a few moments ago. I'm really interested in this connection between fear and control and how that plays out in dating. And like one way I see this play out is maybe you're scared of vulnerability. You know, you're not sure how much you should open up to somebody. Can I trust this person? I get all those thoughts reasonable, especially if you've been hurt in the past or you don't have a lot of relationship experience. But sometimes this fear also acts as a mechanism of control to keep someone away or to keep them just close enough, right? When they start to get a little bit closer, you do the pullback thing perhaps. And so I really want to hear a little bit more about, fear and control and how that ties into toxic productivity.
Fear is like a really big one because fear-based decisions are always coming from a place of deficiency. Like when we make decisions based on fear, so I'm afraid they're going to come too close. I'm afraid they're going to leave me if I open up. I'm afraid that whatever, like fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
Like that's coming from a place of deficiency, and your mind is designed to protect you. It's not designed to make you happy. So it will choose the path of least resistance to protect you, even if that means you're unhappy, right? And so a lot of fear-based decisions actually end up making people feel unhappy. Like you want connection, you're afraid, you don't open up, you're feeling lonely, now you're unhappy, right? And so sometimes we can get imprisoned by a cage of our own making. And sometimes that's all we know. Right? Maybe we grew up with very anxious parents. Maybe fear was the tool utilized for discipline at home. Right? And so it is up to us to understand and identify these patterns because ultimately they're patterns. They are not part of our DNA. They are not traits. They're not moralistic judgments. These are just behavior patterns. Right? It's things we choose to do, and we can choose to not do them. We can choose to do something different. It's very hard, right? But the reason I say that is because sometimes we just end up believing that we are our choices. And then it becomes too hard to change it because you're like, how am I going to change myself? Like, I can't. This is just who I am. And that's very disempowering. So to identify the pattern is the first step in empowering yourself to making decisions rooted in true choice, not fear.
Okay, that's really helpful that fear, our learned traits of behavior is not necessarily, it's like not our DNA. It's not who we are. I love talking about fear on Flirtations. It's one of my absolute favorite topics in the whole wide world.
It's so powerful, right? Like fear is so powerful. And sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like avoidance. Sometimes it looks like extremely charming people, right? So it's like, it's hard to understand who's actually operating from fear on the other side. But eventually, like the cracks start to show. You'll notice it that like this is a pattern that always makes me feel a certain way about somebody, or the mask breaks a little bit because nobody can keep it up forever, right?
Right.
The insecurity or the self-doubt eventually makes its way to the surface.
Absolutely, and that's why it's like talking about this values-based dating system is so important, knowing why you're dating, what it is you're looking for, just getting under, God, why am I going to make a car reference? It happens sometimes. Getting under the hood of the car a little bit about who someone is and also why they're dating, because it's reasonable that, first date, second date on an app, you're flirting on social media or something, to put your best foot forward. I think that's something we all do. I don't think that's inherently disingenuine. But what happens when things get a little too close, right? Or some of those insecurities start to come up. Like my fear is always not being good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like eventually I can only mask and perform my way through that fear for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely like a very interesting. And the thing is, like, everybody does it. We
Totally.
all have some level of fear that we're like battling against. So it's not really like one type of person is this way and the other person is not. I think we all kind of bring it to the table.
Yeah.
And I like what you brought up about value based dating. It's something I talk about in like corporate spaces, like workshops. Like I have this like framework of like how to like lead your ambition through values. But I can see that overlaps so strongly with dating as well.
Yeah, it's so important because what you were talking about earlier in the interview, like I think we often used to date and check the boxes, or we used to focus on the chemistry, right? That the attraction, sort of just everything we have in common, rather than navigating like what is really going to sustain and build the foundation for a relationship is navigating power dynamics and your differences. Very important. If you don't start working through that until you're already in the relationship, Israa, I don't know. That might not go so well. You might be in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I think people come to that, like, this is such a wise thing that you just said, because people come to this realization years and years later.
Oh my God.
You know, it's the work of couples therapists is predominantly what you just described.
Absolutely.
It's like navigating the differences well. And problem solving, I think that's a really big one.
Oh, gosh.
How do you solve problems? Like, what's your perspective on problem solving?
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. That's so important, too. Yeah. And I'm curious to hear about this. I want to come back to belonging for a moment, and also how that is different or maybe similar to this feeling we have of wanting to be chosen. Right. I think a lot of us have that mindset in dating of wanting to be picked. And I don't think that's inherently bad either. It feels good to be picked. But what's maybe the difference between choice and belonging in dating?
That's such a nuanced question. I'm glad that you ask it. So, I mean, I'll say on the outset that you're totally correct. Wanting to be chosen is not a bad thing. And the difference, I think, falls along the lines of internal validation and external validation. Okay. And you always want to have things in balance. You can't just be internally validated and not give a rat's tail about the rest of the world. Like, we can't live like that because that's very isolating. It's very individualistic, right? Yeah. But you can't also exist in the sphere of external validation only, right? And that the only way you feel good is externally. So wanting to be chosen is the external validation. A sense of belonging is an internal sense of compatibility, right? Belonging is an internal, connection to the compatibility that you have with the people around you.
Okay.
It doesn't always mean that it's going to be positive. It will be difficult. It will be hard. There will be ups and downs, a cliche, right? But it is net positive to your experience. So that's belonging. There's an internal alignment with intention and value. You are at ease. You can show up in your whole self without the fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Whereas the external validation, the wanting to be chosen, that is missing. There is a fear that you will be rejected when you show up in your whole self, right? Wow. And so we perform and we act, and that's fine. Like, we all do it, and it's part of being alive. But we need to have both those things in balance.
Yes. Wow. Flirties, play that back. That was really, really good, because I have here, like, on my notes, and like, this is no surprise to the Flirties and everyone listening, like, sometimes tying it back to fear for a moment, we fear losing someone, or we fear rejection, or we fear maybe we've been dating someone for a month, 2 months, right? A little bit of sunk cost fallacy. Like, I've already put so much time, energy, and effort. I don't want to start from scratch. I don't want to go back to zero with somebody else. And so we may rush to kind of make someone ours, in a sense, to define the relationship, to say, all right, I can call someone mine, but is that decision a choice born out of fear, or this internal validation, sort of resourcefulness that you were just speaking to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, like this is like so challenging, especially.
I know.
It's so hard. I want to name that like
Okay.
theoretically, all of this is so fun to talk about, but
Yeah.
the like a boots on the ground on the front lines, if you will, like it sucks, right? Like the dating world is challenging right now. I see articles every single day. There's a lot of fear mongering, around this culture right now. And so a lot of the fears that people have are reflective of the current state of our society, right? People are genuinely, there's like a loneliness epidemic, there's this and there's that. So like there is some truth to why we may fear those things. But when it comes to like really making decisions, we can get stuck in, is this the right decision to make or the wrong decision to make? And that's where fear comes in, right? Oh my gosh, it's going to be wrong because you're going to die alone, right? That's always like the line of thought. What I always like to say to people, and honestly, this is not my original thought, and I have tried so hard to find this creator, and I have been completely unsuccessful. But there was some creator who was doing like a man in the, you just go and like ask people.
Oh, yeah, like on the street kind of interviews sort of thing. Yeah. Okay.
And he asked a woman why she knew having children was the right choice for her, right? And she said something so profound. She said, there is really no right or wrong choice. It's only the choice your life grows around. So if you choose something and you build a life around that choice, that is the right choice for you. It doesn't matter what could have been, because it only becomes good if you build a life around it, right? So whatever your life grows around becomes the good choice for you because you invest in it. So it's the same with dating. Like, if you're going to choose to date somebody and you see the red flags a little bit, right? Instead of telling yourself, oh, I'm going to fix them, recognize that there will be barriers in a life with this person because of these reasons. And that's how your life will grow around. And maybe you grow together, maybe you don't, but we have to go in with like open eyes about what we're doing, because there is just a lot of fear around everybody when it comes to dating.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because none of this, I mean, here we are, a nice little, hour-long podcast interview, like, but this is like, I mean, you wrote an entire book on this, have an entire, digital health resource, mental health resource practice dedicated to this. Like this will be, come back to this episode, parts of the conversation that really struck you, read Isra's book and check out Well Guide. Like this is, yes, it's your life's work, as like we're going to, teaser as we start to conclude the interview here in a few moments, coming back home to you, right? That's a huge kind of how your book starts to wrap up as well, and how you can just start to weave and pivot through some of those barriers to just being with ourselves, which is, that's what it's all about. I got to ask you this question. We've been talking about it, and that's validation, and specifically external validation, because I tell people to flirt all the time and offer a compliment or two, right? Smile, say hello kind of thing. Like external validation isn't inherently bad either. It feels amazing. And so what is the balance though, between perhaps deriving, so much of our sense of self-worth from being validated, chosen, needed by others, and feeling validated within ourselves?
The foundational validation is the one that comes from inside. And then we build the external one on top of it. What's happened is when we, are starting school, etc., like very quickly, it all becomes about external validation. Like we're all raised to it, right? Like, oh, like you get like the gold star or whatever in school. Like it starts very early.
Yeah.
So our work as adults who wanted to heal is to make the internal validation the foundation of how we view ourselves. And so the external validation becomes a layer on top of it. That gives you a strong foundation. If the foundation is just external and you try to build internal on top of it, it's not going to hold for very long. Because the moment someone takes away validation, you lose your job, somebody breaks up with you, it'll come down, right?
Yeah.
So the practice of building, like transforming the foundational view of self to internal first, not internal only, but internal first, is getting comfortable with spending time with yourself.
Okay.
Right? Intentionally being single for some time. Doesn't have to be very long, but in a presence of yourself, where you are getting to know yourself, or learn about yourself, what you like, what you dislike. That can be in emotional intimacy. It can be in the physical intimacy realm as well. A lot of people don't really take the time to get to know themselves. So however they exist in relationships, whether it's dating, friendships, or romance, is always relative to another person. But who are you in the absence of others? And so that needs to be built out. And so we need to start spending intentional time alone. You know, I've been in a long-term relationship for almost 9 years now. But I have a weekly practice of going on a solo date. My partner does not do that, right? But I, over the course of these 10 years, almost 10 years, weekly go out. And I also go on vacation alone at least once a year, if not once every 2 years. Right. And so this idea that if we're alone, then we're sad. And once we're partnered, we can never be alone. Like, that's not the way to know yourself as you change and as you evolve. And so I think that's really important, is spending time with yourself, and then also investing in time that you give yourself for joy. So I've been evangelizing this literally, like, you know, I could probably do like a little talk on it, but hobbies are a very important way of getting to know ourselves.
Okay.
Hobbies allow us to decompress, tap into creativity. Most often the things that we are attracted to in creative spaces were originally things that gave us a lot of joy before we moved into autopilot. Right. And so I think like trying to tap back into that same energy, going back to the origin of joy, where you found it as a child, that is exceptionally healing and transformative. And so that gives you these like little foundational bolsters to build your sense of self on. And then you can have the external stuff, right? But I always tell people, if you're doing hobbies, it's not for anybody else. We're not performing it on social media. We're not monetizing it. We're not creating an Etsy shop for it. It's just for us. And we're not trying to get good at it either.
What you mean? We're not going to toxic productivity our hobbies as well?
No.
Oh,
fight capitalism.
We're not going to film everything and try to make money from it?
No, I know. As a content creator, I fully understand that. But but you need to preserve something for yourself.
Yes.
You have to preserve something for yourself.
Wow. That's so good. You're amazing, Israa. Because this was a lesson that it was a hard one to learn. I wasn't even aware of it for the longest time, talking about building just self-awareness around our own habits and behaviors. And that is like, I felt like when you were dating and forming relationships, right, you gave someone everything. You gave them 100%. Because isn't that just what you did? It seems like that's what you saw on the movies and on TV and in books. And if you're a hopeful romantic like me, like those were the love story arcs we saw, where you became one with somebody else. And that's beautiful. I love that. But you stand to lose a lot in that. And that thing you have to lose is you. You can't give someone, if you give someone 100% of you all the time, what's left for you when you have a bad day? And the person you're dating in a relationship with, they're having a bad day as well. And they don't have 100% to give you, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's like this concept of like merging into one is just, for me, psychologically, probably one of the most harmful messages that we have shared with people about love, because love is not meant to be like a complete union. You're supposed to be kind of like the MasterCard logo. It's like two circles with one like overlap in the middle. That overlap in the middle is a place where the relationship thrives, only because the two individual people in their own spheres are thriving.
Yes.
If you are merged into one, then you're right. If you're both having a bad day, you're both going to pull each other down.
Right.
And so we can't operate like that. We need to have a separation and we need to have an overlap.
Definitely. A healthy Venn diagram.
Yes,
Spreadsheets,
there you
Excel. This is also a math lesson on Flirtations today. I've got one more question for you here before we begin to wrap up the conversation. This has been just so much fun and really amazing. And I want to ask you about perfectionism for a moment. I think this ties into fear and control a little bit as well, where sometimes we might even settle for singleness when we use perfectionism as a way to disqualify everybody. It's sort of this protective, it's a way to protect ourselves. But that's just one thing that's coming to mind. But I want to hear a little bit about how perfectionism ties into all of this.
Yeah. So perfectionism is like heightened anxiety. And that's what it is.
All the flirties like, nodding their head. Yes.
And there's three types, right? So there's one that's directed at the self. I have to be perfect. One that is directed at the other. You have to be perfect. Right. And so the standards become very high for somebody else to meet you where you're at. And the third is other people have to see me as perfect. This is performative. Like I might be falling apart on the inside, but I've got the Stepford wife smile on the outside, right? And so all three of these types of perfectionisms show up in dating, whether it's you putting it on somebody else, you wanting other people to see you a certain way. There's a lack of vulnerability there. And ultimately, perfectionism is trying to control an uncertain outcome. And so the antidote to perfectionism in the dating world is like twofold. One is to invite some mediocre moments into your life. Get comfortable with a just good enough restaurant. Like you don't, like if a date is not at a Michelin star, like that's okay. If the sparks are not 100% and they're 85, that's okay. Like to kind of get out of this mindset, this black and white mindset, right? And the second is to practice radical acceptance in creating something that's called psychological flexibility, your ability to adapt to changing circumstances and environments. Perfectionists cannot do that. One thing in the plan changes, like you're going on vacation, weather changes, a perfectionist will have a complete shutdown, right? Because but you can't control the weather. You can do anything in the world, but you cannot control the weather.
Right.
So practicing that radical acceptance allows you psychological flexibility, which allows you to be more authentic. Because when we are being too perfectionist, we're not being authentic. And the other person is getting a sanitized version of you. So they'll never get to know who you really are, and you won't have deep bonds. You won't have deep connections.
Yeah. Wow. You were just talking about vulnerability and authentic connections in dating and relationships. And as we were talking about starting to come full circle from the beginning of the interview, some of the things that may impact our ability to have those vulnerable, authentic connections, some of those barriers. I mean, perfectionism, this wanting to be chosen, like rushing. We got the checks boxes. We talked about Excel and Venn diagrams. And so how can we bring some vulnerability and just some humanness into this process and to dating?
Yeah, this is a big question. And I think different people will relate to this differently. So I want to say that because it's not a one size fits all. One of the trends I'm seeing that is very worrisome, without sounding like clutching my pearls, is that people have confused oversharing with vulnerability.
Yes.
Right? We're like doing this boomerang and we're like, oh, I have to be authentic. So I'm going to tell you my deepest traumas within 20 minutes of meeting you. That is not appropriate for your own wellness, let alone the other person, right? We are creating these like litmus tests of like, are you going to be able to handle me? So I'm going to throw my darkest darts at you. Like that's not fair. That's not how we build real connection. Because when we overshare, we are manufacturing vulnerability. So when it comes to practicing true vulnerability, the first thing that we have to recognize is who are we being vulnerable with and why? That's when you're dating, think about it. Like, does this person deserve this level of vulnerability right now from me? Right? Have they shown me that they are a safe person to hold it and reflect it back to me? Requires some awareness of why am I sharing the things that I tend to share on first dates, on second dates? Or why haven't I shared a certain thing by the fifth date, like what's holding me back, right? You have to really get in the practice of understanding that about yourself. And that will allow you to decide who to be vulnerable with.
Yeah.
So I think that's like sometimes I think right now the problem isn't as much we are not being vulnerable. It's we are being oversharey and manufacturing vulnerability. The second piece I say for dating purposes is have a few things or thoughts in your mind that reflect who you are, your experiences, offer some relatability and softness that are predetermined by you as not being oversharing.
Okay.
So vulnerability is important. So you need to know what's appropriate for you to share in the beginning. And so having that it's not manipulative. It's not like prescribing. It's just being like, these are the things I'm comfortable sharing about myself that are not going to give me a vulnerability hangover, that I'll share if it comes up.
Okay.
Right. So having a list of things about you and your life, like if you feel like it's like easy for you to, let's say, talk about your parents' divorce when you were like 6 and you find it adds a little bit of color. Maybe you have some great jokes about it that you're comfortable with. Right. Absolutely share it. Okay. But if that is not something you're ready to share, then you don't have to force yourself to share it, And so I think like that's a really important part of dating. Vulnerability in like a relationship is a little different.
Sure.
Because when we're dating, we haven't really assessed whether the person is a safe person. Right. We are assessing.
Yes.
We're assessing. So it's like a present tense. And so your vulnerability has to match the appropriateness of the depth of the relationship that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. This distinction between vulnerability and oversharing is so important. And one thing I've learned having these conversations, which helped me, is that vulnerability inherently has, like, there's an implied risk there. So, like, you don't have to share something about yourself, like on a first date, going into your deepest, darkest secrets or your traumas, of course. But, as like compatible with like the length of time you've been dating, with what the other person has been sharing about themselves, sort of assessing that connection for yourself. And then also, yes, there's some risk involved, but if you talk about your whole life on a first date and you do that every single time, I would say that's a habit. There's really no risk involved there. It's just something you do.
Yeah, and you're kind of comfortable with the consequence of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's other ways to be vulnerable that don't involve sharing, right?
Absolutely.
So being the first person to make the plan to ask.
Gosh, yes.
Right?
So
sharing, but like saying that, hey, I love museums. Let's go to this museum, right? Like really being the first person to do that. The first person to apologize. Owning up to something that hurt the other person by way of negligence. Maybe you didn't text them back because you were texting on the apps or whatever. But owning up, accountability is vulnerability, right?
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
So we don't have to just share. We actually can embody vulnerability.
We forget that part a lot.
Asking for consent is vulnerability.
100%.
Because you're putting yourself in a position of saying, hey, I really want this. Do you want it too? But we kind of jump through that and don't put ourselves in that position, right? And so I think like we can embody vulnerability as well.
If only we could end there, but I'm going to squeeze in one more question before we wrap up. And that is, ending here, the final chapter of your book, Toxic Productivity, is entitled Finding a Way Back to Yourself. I mean, the conversation we've been having is like, come back, play it back. Like, none of this is easy. You're going to probably make forward progress, a few steps back, make mistakes, trial and error, like as you change, not just perhaps the way you date and pattern in relationships, but the way you change the relationship you have with yourself as well. I mean, shifting out of this toxic productivity, just defining your worth based on your achievements, how much money you have, your status, right? Your title, the car, the things, all of that stuff is so hard, especially when you live in a culture where it seems like that's what we all want in a sense. And so coming back, but we don't. We want belonging. Belonging is what we want. So finding a way back to yourself, a few, maybe one or two tips or tricks that we can, come back home to us.
I think, the one I'll say is a really big one, is emotional regulation. And that is like, it sounds so big, but I think oftentimes it's kind of framed as like inner child healing, on social media, but it's really like not being afraid of your emotions anymore. And so giving yourself that permission. And so you can kind of like take this framework that I'm going to be very quick. It's an acronym, CARE, CARE. And it's essentially like being curious about yourself, finding the agency you have in that moment around that emotion.
Okay.
Right. And then practicing regulation, like actually like taking a deep breath, doodling, like something that brings you down. And then creating an environment of gentleness around you. And that allows you to ease up, then like quiet the noise and come back to yourself. So oftentimes when we struggle with something, we are critical instead of curious. When we struggle with something, we say, I don't have power, and we lose our agency. When we struggle with something, we ignore our difficult emotions, right? And sometimes we stay in environments or we seek out environments that are disruptive or dysfunctional, right? That can show up as drinking too much, eating too much, using too many substances, being around people are bad for you. But sometimes you're just in that, you're just like, you have that urge to be destructive. We have all been there.
Absolutely.
We have all been there, right? Myself included. So like caring for yourself is doing the opposite of that, right? It's curiosity, finding the agency, regulating, and seeking a gentle environment. It's a practice. It's a daily practice that we can build in small, small doses.
Yes. Wow, that was beautiful. You can check out the book, of course, Well Guide on Instagram, or come to one of my yoga classes. We'll practice care together. I could talk to you forever, but we're going to conclude the conversation. Final question I have is where the Flirties can find you, follow you, check out the book, learn more about you, perhaps work with you. Where can
so the hub is Instagram. It's well.guide. I'm pretty active on there. I post consistently. The links are there for my book and my website and my Substack. So like everything that you need to know about me is on my Instagram.
Fantastic. I will have that link and some others as well in the show notes below for this episode. Israa Nasir, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today.
Yeah, thank you. This was such a fun conversation.
All right, Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the Toxic Productivity and Am I Enough episode of the program. I hope we've answered all of your questions. And yes, Flirty, yes, you are enough, just as you are, just as who you are today. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our incredible guest, Israa Nasir, for coming on the show today. Please, please, please check out the book, Toxic Productivity. Check her out online. The website is there for you. Links below in the show notes for this episode, and Well Guide on Instagram. An absolutely incredible resource. If you're on Instagram, follow well.guide. If you're not, create a burner account just to follow well.guide. You will not regret it. I promise. The resources, the information, the knowledge, wisdom, and insight is just incredible. Thank you so much, Israa Nasir. Okay, Flirties, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed this conversation today, wherever you are in the world. Just truly, thank you. Thank you so much. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show. If you haven't already, share this episode or another favorite episode of Flirtations with a friend, someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with, who may need to hear this conversation. Send it their way. Okay, signing off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.